Hello again. It is March 29, 2023, a capture of the Afro-centric exploration of the Holy Writings. Today it is Genesis chapter 25. I was going to do 25 and 26, but it seems like 25 is a standalone story that needs to be captured as such. And in chapter 5, there are a couple of things that are explored there. First, Abraham's sons by Keturah. Abraham had other kids. There is the death of Abraham. Then there is the birth of Esau and Jacob. And here, Esau sells his birthright to his brother Jacob. So we are going to consider these aspects, these stories one by one. So that's the gist of chapter 25. So I'm not gonna go into chapter 26 because chapter 26 is just on its own. So what about Abraham's sons by Keturah? What can we glean from this episode? One, Abraham had other kids, and he had in total 6 sons from Keturah. Here, there's no mention of where Keturah is from. Probably a Canaan, because he was living amongst those people. And there is no mention that there is a woman that came from his kindred to be married by Abraham. So, and I think that most of the time, this is not mentioned. We all talk about um, um, Isaac as if he was the only son that Abraham got. He didn't. There was Ishmael, remember, the son that he got by Hagar, and his firstborn, to be correct. Then there are other 6 sons that Abraham gets from Keturah, and this is Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. So he has a whole fleet of a whole, basketball team and some reserve there, right? Then these kids had their own kids, and what happens is that Abraham gave to everything that he had to Isaac. And of course, he gave gifts to these other children and sent them away from Isaac so that Isaac can prosper on his own. So that's what happened. But in verse 6, there is the word that we saw, concubine, that was explored by the brother of Abraham. It is coming back here and it says, but unto the sons of the concubine which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac, his son. All of them are his son anyway. But it seems like, and it is clear that Abraham had other kids, and he had other kids from concubine, and this institution of concubine was common, was accepted by society, by the patriarch, and he practiced it himself. I said at some point that there were these 2 girls that um, and you have to admit here at this point, Sarah is dead. They were heartened by, or they were hurt by the fact that Abraham was allowed to have concubines. Obviously, they knew about this. And my response was that it is all about the purpose. Abraham has accomplished his purpose, and everything that he was doing was in line with the purpose. Of course, Isaac is one kid, but the purpose was to fill the earth with as many kids as possible. And just one kid will not do that. So he had other women, other concubines that fulfilled that role, and one of them was actually um, the 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 handmaid of Sarah, that's Hagar, the mother of Ishmael. And Abraham dies. He dies at the age of 175. It says that he was old and full of old age and satisfied with years. You have to remember that when we were talking about the patriarch in previous chapters, they used to live longer than this. So 175 really is a decline from the norm, from the usual time that these patriarchs were living. Nonetheless, 175 is quite remarkable. And to say that, when he had Isaac, he was 100 years old, and he had all these other kids after that. That is just remarkable. The other thing to get from this is the fact that it seems like there was an issue with Sarah. She was barren, and had God had to intervene, or what is that intervention to be able to give birth that to Isaac, right? And Isaac was special, and he had to find a wife for him in that family, his sister, pretty much. But was it his cousin or his niece, to be uh, exact? That is to be explored, because chances are that Isaac was not exactly Abraham's son, typically because there was an intervention, an outside intervention that um, made possible for Sarah to conceive at age 90. Now, Abraham dies at age 175. And what happened here, the description is that then Abraham gave up the ghost. The ghost. Abraham gave up the ghost. And by giving the ghost, I don't know what that means, but in other translations, it says that he gave up his last breath. And that's a dilution of what the ghost may mean. It may be something else, and the ghost may be a spirit that inhabit the human uh, living, and it really speaks to our two dimensions, being material but also being spiritual. And this translation has been removed from new translations. These words have been removed from new translation to imply that it was just he stopped breathing. But it could be that back then there was a clear uh, distinction between those two, and when someone of that magnitude died, it was apparent that the ghost had lived their presence. The other thing that is interesting is here is that Abraham and his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah. Machpelah? So this is confusing. Remember that Ishmael is already sent away by his father to die. But here again, Ishmael is around to bury his father. This is not usually preached, to say that Ishmael came. Ishmael was really a very powerful and predominant figure in the Abrahamic descendants, and he actually buried his father. He was there to bury his father in the land that he purchased from the sons of Zoar, and where Rebekah was buried. Rebekah, who, by the way, sent him away to perish with his mother Hagar. So, where is Ishmael coming from? Nobody knows. But he's there. And it's easy to forget that Ishmael, who is the son of an Egyptian, who is the black an African child, was so important in the Abrahamic descendants. Now, it says here that after that, the names of the sons of Ishmael. Ishmael had many kids, and one particular, sorry, one particular verse caught my attention, and that was verse 16 of 25, chapter 25. And it says, "These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles." Very powerful. 12 princes according to their nation. You remember that these 12 tribes or 12 kind of tribe will come up later on or will be adopted and applied to um, the Israelites. But this is the genesis of the 12, the principle of 12 kingdom or 12 princes or 12 tribes. And this is not from Isaac, but rather from Ishmael, who is of African descent. And you can see that our forefathers or our ancestors were putting these messages here for us to open our eyes and see that we were not lost in translation, but we were very present and very difficult to erase all of it. A lot of things were changed because obviously the book has been touched to reflect a certain narrative, but these remnant are still there for us to open our eyes and see that it has happened as an African narrative that empowers us, that shows that we are in the plans of God despite our current circumstances, our current state. And we have played that role for very, very, very long time, despite the change in history and everything that has come. And you can see this and it's exciting to see that these things are coming up and really showing that we're there. Now, the other thing is that there are now kids born to Isaac, right? And Isaac took Rebekah when he was 40. There is a confusion here on verse 20 because it identified Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian, of Padam Aram, and the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now, they are described as Syrian, right? But you remember that these are kids that were from Nahor, who was brother to Abraham. They have taken this nationality, but they are now identified as different from the Abrahamic descendants itself. And you can see how these names, Syrians, Israel, and Palestinians, Jordanian, and all that kind of thing, these names keep coming back because these people are related somehow. But it's interesting to say that Bethuel is identified as Syrian. Bethuel um, is the father-in-law for Isaac, the the father of uh, um, of Rebecca in this case. So you see that the Syrians, as a state today, despite the fact that there have been attempts to um, subjugate them, they are a very ancient civilization and powerful one in the purpose of God, and they've been blessed. That's why you can hear also that when there was a war there's still war in Syria, these towns that like Aleppo that were very ancient civilization, and they just came and destroyed it, backed by certain entities for a certain purpose. it's to erase that memory of the existence of these things, so that the new generations that will come later on will not even know that Aleppo was such a vibrant city and has this heritage back from back then, right? So they are identified as Syrian, and I think that it's very important to um, remember that. Now, Isaac had Rebecca. Rebecca came from the same nation where Sarah came from. And again, Rebecca is barren. Isaac had to go to God to, and the word that is used here is, and the Lord was entreated of, so, and Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. It was after consultation with God that Rebekah was, the Lord in this case, that Rebekah was able to conceive, just like it was for Isaac's mother. You can see a pattern there, that these things are not just random. These are small details, but if you look into them, you see that there is an intervention that we consider to be miraculous, but it could be literal in the sense that these children are really from a non-human origin, because they are of the intervention and the interbreeding between um, the ancient people at that point and the gods or the angels were very common. We saw the history of um, Noah, which has led to the downfall of humanity. But it seems like there was an intervention or a continuous appearance of angels into human affairs, and they were walking among men in the market for Lot to recognize them or Abraham to recognize them. So they would have a material presence. So for them to entreat the Lord, and then the kids, the children are born, is one thing. Now, the, the strange thing here is that the Lord even predicts that these two will have they were fighting in their mother's belly, and predicts that these two, out of this will come two nations, and these two nations, they are brothers, and they will fight each other, and the older one will serve the younger one. And that is really a segue into the birth of Esau and Jacob, two brothers. And Esau was a hunter, remember, and Jacob was working the field. Again, there is a little detail here. If you inverse the role, their way of working, it's like Cain and Abel. They were fighting, and Cain was the one that was uh, a, working the land, and Abel uh, was a hunter, and their sacrifices were sent as such. But here, again, Esau is the one who is the hunter, and the hunter is usually the one that is um, a good one. And because the sacrifice is good, is appealing, and it was the same thing was reflected because the father, who is Isaac, liked Esau more than he liked Jacob. Okay, for parents who think that they cannot have uh, preferred or preferences or a weak spot towards certain kids, it happened to the patriarchs, and it may happen to us, and it happened. So, and because of that, there was a complication there. Because of that, Esau ended up selling his birthright as an older brother to his brother in terms of the land that Esau was to inherit, and that was given now to Jacob. Jacob, who was actually um, working the land, and you can see you can switch them. You cannot give the land that you did not have, right? Or the hunter had an expansion, could explore the land more than the the agriculture will do. And in that way, he was able to give his birthright. It is usually explained that he did not appreciate the blessings that he had gotten um, from God. But this was written in the books before that this one will serve the other one. And of course, that's what happened. And Esau ended up losing his birthright. And that what happens usually in an Afro-centric way of looking at things is we have been blessed with so much in our motherland, Africa. And it is a land like none other. And it seems like we do not appreciate it as we should. And we are in a position where we are selling it out to foreign powers, to foreigners of Africa who are not native of there. Or, and it has started because in a way that was not really a selling, it was taken away from us. We got it, back, so to speak, um, miraculously, but it was not given back to us because the systems that we still use were foreign to us, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's not working as much as we would like it to do. But the thing is that the appreciation that we should have for that land should be beyond measure. And I think I mentioned this at some point, the need for every one of us, especially people in the diaspora, to have some kind of physical link to the land of Africa from wherever we come from, because the alternative will be that it will be either taken away or it will be sold to people who will appreciate it more. And this is what happens a lot in our land, because there are, it is true that foreign nations or foreign interests know more about Africa than we Africans know about Africa, because they've explored it, they've been herdsmen, so to speak, in our lands, and they've seen what it is about, and they are coming back with a system to buy it from us, and we are acting like Esau in selling our birthright to other people. And these messages were put in there for us to take the hint that we have to appreciate our land, and we should not sell any inch of it. In certain part of the world, and most part, like for example, and people say that we have that system in for example, in my country, in the Congo, that you cannot buy the land you just give. I forget the name of that legal maneuver where you have the land for 25 years and it is renewed every 25 years. But it is enforced in places like Israel. You cannot buy a land. 50 years later, it goes back to the government and they will decide whether they will renew that or not, right? And that is an appreciation of the land that they have gotten, because it could be lost. They cannot sell it. Same thing in China. I believe it's 100 years in China that you can not really have it. It's only in North America where I think that you can just buy land, and it's because all of us just you know we took it. It has been taken from the native of this land, who did not sell it or sold it or have been tricked into a treaty of selling the land, and we are benefiting from it. And we can say, okay, this is my land for generations and generation without any consequence. Anywhere else, it doesn't happen. You can go in Europe, you can be, um, I mean, in any other part of the world. The native people will not just, you cannot overtake them. Unfortunately, this is what is happening in Africa. And before we know it, we will be enslaved in a way that is worse than what it used to be, because when it happened the first time, we still had our land. No matter what you do, we can just say, you know what, this is the land of our ancestors. You take your shit and go out. It happened a lot in many places in Africa. And it still has, contentions at this point. But we could do that. Now, if it happens, now as we continue to disregard and the value of this land, we will lose more than 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 we have lost in the past, and we have lost so much. That's the gist of chapter 25, what we can get from it. Of course, you can get something from it as well. We have our wealth, racial wealth gap seminar next week, the 6th of April. Um, the link is below. Get there, and we'll see you next Thursday. And before that, we'll go into chapter 26 to see the gist of it. Bye bye.